Stephen Miller was, unfortunately, on one of the more unfortunate shows on Fox News, Laura Ingram's, to make the case for why the United States should reject Afghan refugees.
Joining me now, Stephen Miller, former Trump senior advisor, founder of America First Legal. Stephen, again, we want to help the Afghans who helped us in a meaningful way, a verifiable way, and there are many of those. But should we trust the Biden administration to carefully vet these folks?
Not only should we not trust the Biden administration to do so, the simple reality is that we no longer are in control of the central apparatus in Afghanistan to be able to vet anybody. The Taliban has all of the control of the government now. So the notion that people could just show up at a checkpoint and demand resettlement into the United States and we could have any idea about their background, their belief system, where they come from, now that the US-backed government has fallen, it's just an impossibility.
Well, I mean, that was yet another example of how a man who literally worked for a presidential administration does not have the expertise, the knowledge, the anything to serve in those kinds of positions. He is an absolute moron. I mean, there are only two possibilities here. Either he's a moron and he literally doesn't know how the vetting process for refugees works, or he's intentionally lying because he is a white supremacist, or both. It could be both. But who knows? Maybe this is a good opportunity, right? Maybe this is a good teachable moment for Stephen Miller. Maybe he's open to information about how our government works and how people are vetted if they're seeking asylum in the United States, if they're trying to settle as refugees in this country, because it's actually a very lengthy and difficult process. Let me share the details real quick, and then John, I'll go to you, because this is gonna take a while though, because there are 20 steps, starting with registration, not with the Taliban, okay? Registration with the United Nations, that's the first thing a refugee needs to do. Interview with the United Nations. Refugee status granted by the United Nations if the United Nations decides that this person does in fact deserve refugee status. At that point, referral for resettlement in the United States, interview with the State Department contractors, first background check, higher level background check for some, like Syrian refugees, for instance. Then another background check. So at this point, we're dealing with the third background check. And the refugee's name is run through law enforcement and intelligence databases for terrorist or criminal history. Some go through a higher level clearance before they can continue. A third background check was introduced in 2008 for Iraqis, but has since been expanded to all refugees ages 14 to 65. If they pass that portion of this vetting process, they move on to step number 9. First, fingerprint screening, photo taken. Then after that, second fingerprint screening, because you know the first time you do the fingerprint, their fingerprint might change.
Could smudge.
Might smudge, so who knows? Then step 11, third fingerprint screening. The refugees' fingerprints are screened against FBI and Homeland Security databases, which contain watch list information and past immigration encounters, including if the refugee previously applied for a visa at a United States embassy. Fingerprints are also checked against those collected by the Defense Department during operations in Iraq. So this is specifically, I mean, this applies to everyone, but the article that I was reading was specifically covering Iraqi refugees and what they have to go through. But understand, we're not having a conversation about like, oh, can we really rely on information from the Taliban? That's not what the government does. That's not what this process relies on. Step number 12, case reviewed at United States Immigration
That was just the first 11?
No, there's 20, there's 20 steps, okay? Step 13, some cases referred for additional review, so Syrians have to undergo the additional review. And that's all because Syrian refugees became incredibly politicized toward the tail end of Obama's second term for political reasons, purely political reasons. There's nothing that indicates that Syrian refugees are more dangerous than other refugees. Step 14, extensive in-person interview with Homeland Security officer. You know what, I apologize, John. Now jump in, because obviously this is taking too much time and I feel bad that you're being filibustered.
Well, I've just been listening to it. I've already given up on trying to get into the country. So I can only imagine how difficult it is actually going through it. Look, so yes, it seems now absurd to think that like there was like a notebook in an office in Kabul that had all the data, and we lost it, so I guess we can't do it anymore. But the good side of this is, assuming we can get this video to Stephen Miller, I think this is gonna make him feel a lot better because he was obviously torn up over the possibility that we wouldn't be able to admit more refugees. He just hated it. He was accurately describing the process, he just hated that we couldn't do it. It's just such, he spent like, and that's why he's there on the show. It's because the only thing he was an advisor for in the Trump administration was, hey, have you ever thought about not having any refugees, any immigrants of any kind? It was a novel idea he came up with, and that was it.
That was it.
That was all that he did for 4 years.
It was not only his only purpose during the Trump administration, it's the only thing he cares about.
And what the position that he had, the radical position that you and I know Cenk talked about this a lot over the past few years. It was the swelling of the position from no illegal immigrants to no immigrants, basically. And Tucker Carlson just yesterday on his show said we shouldn't be letting anyone into the country until we get our problems solved or whatever, which is one of those vague things that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And he's not just talking about it, he means let's not have immigrants anymore. We came in, I don't care if I'm Irish, if I'm German, whatever, we got in. Now close the doors and we'll just coast on this from now on. That is their actual position. And so, yeah, they bring him on and they get what wisdom they can from Stephen Miller as his body rapidly rots away. But that's the position of more and more people on the right, that there is no need for immigration whatsoever.
Now, a little later in this video, we're gonna get to a veteran who decided to rip Stephen Miller to shreds, and you don't want to miss that. But I got to finish the rest of the steps. I think it's important for people to know. I think it's important for Stephen Miller to know. Again, this is an opportunity, right? So step 14 was extensive in-person interview with Homeland Security officer. Then you get to 15. Homeland Security approval is required. So after that, if they are approved screening for contagious diseases, then they have to go through a cultural orientation class, okay? To make sure that they are assimilated into American culture. Then they're matched.
I gotta take that class. I'm really curious what's in that class now. Wouldn't you wanna know?
Yeah, I do, although look, I want to be proud of my country. This is where I was born, and don't get me wrong, I am proud of parts of this country. I think that there are a lot of wonderful people in this country. When you see this kind of stuff, it goes beyond embarrassment. I mean, it's just like this government represents us, and I'm not just talking about the Biden administration. The US government represents Americans overall. And think about the amount of brutality that we've engaged in through our foreign policy. The fact that we're still implementing crippling sanctions against countries like Iran after our government decided to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. They accepted 3.5 million Afghan refugees over the years. And their economy is completely and utterly destroyed because of US sanctions. Like all of this pain and suffering that we're spreading across the globe, like I feel a lot of shame about that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't want to know what's in that cultural orientation class because it's just crushing. All of this is crushing. 18, matched with an American resettlement agency. 19, multi-agency security check before leaving for the United States. And then finally they get to step 20. And they have to go through a final security check at an American airport. So this is a vetting process that literally takes several years, like dozens of steps. And to treat this as if like, oh, we don't know what we're doing. We just, we're gonna have to rely on information from the Taliban. That's not what happens. He's lying. This is who Stephen Miller is. Now, I felt a little bit of comfort after hearing the interview that you're about to watch. So this was on CNN. It features an Afghan war veteran named Matt Zeller. He did fight in Afghanistan. His life was saved by an Afghan individual, and he feels a lot of responsibility to withhold the promise that the United States made toward the Afghans, assisting us in that war. But better yet, he has words. Let's just put it that way for Stephen Miller. Let's watch.
As far as I'm concerned, he personally is as complicit as the Taliban in these people's deaths. He should be held accountable for war crimes. He spent the entirety of the Trump administration purposely trying to prevent these people from coming here. I've had meetings with him and his ilk. I brought the interpreter who saved my life to some of those meetings. We met with a lady by the name of Andrea Loving. She's the deputy counsel for the House Judiciary Committee for the GOP. Janice and I were sitting in a meeting with her. She's Stephen's counterpart at the time in Congress. And we were debating about whether or not Congress should allocate more visas for these people. She then articulated what his platform was. I pointed to Janice and I said, this is a gentleman who saved my life. Maybe you've just never had a chance to meet an Afghan. And so it helped to put a face to these people's names. And they looked at me and they said, you're doing nothing but letting Islamic fundamentalist terrorists into our country, and it's our job to stop you. Wrong. These are our people. There is no us and them. There's just an us. And you know what? Stephen Miller never wore a uniform a day in his life. He's a privileged little brat.
Yep.
He is a privileged little brat. And to be quite honest with you, you watched the entirety of that interview. It was good. He's even worse than that. Mm-hmm. Like the fact that he revels in hatred, like he loves it. He loves being a hateful, little conniving, I don't know.
Yeah, and you can see he's got dead little eyes. Let's not gloss it. You look in his eyes and you see nothing. There's no humanity remaining. Look, yeah, I mean that's the random first shot that B-roll brought up. But no, he is a reanimated skeleton sent back to our world to do evil. That's all it is. And unfortunately, he was able to cozy up to power under Trump. And now, because he was near Trump for a while, they're gonna bring him on the news every once in a while. Yeah. But you can count on him. Everything he says when he opens his mouth is gonna be abhorrent. It's gonna be immoral. We do have an obligation to these people. We can not only make good on the promises stated or otherwise and do something objectively moral in saving these people, but we can make our country stronger and better by bringing them in.
Absolutely. And look, I think that Hillary Clinton actually did a pretty good job several years ago explaining why the United States is responsible for what happened in Afghanistan, but more importantly, responsible to the people of Afghanistan. Let's watch this old interview that she did with Greta Van Susteren on Fox News.
To be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting. How? Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
And now, after 20 years in the Afghanistan war, all of that weaponry, all of that gear that was given to the Afghan National Army, that's now in the hands of the Taliban. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of understand why the people of Afghanistan are trying to flee for safety.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.